Hey everyone, so today we are going to be creating this lovely acrylic and mixed media piece. As you can see, there it is. Woo! um, basically, with this, I'm going to show you a really awesome way of creating that piece nice and easily. Completely different to my usual method that I would do a figure painting, even a mixed media one as that is. It's a really good shortcut, and hopefully you'll be able to watch to the end and you will be able to create this too. It's not a particularly advanced piece. I know it looks really quite challenging, but it's actually not. Oh, there's my little kid. I was painting this with the kids at home, like starting. I had to get the canvas down, and that's just the way it worked. Had to have the kids there. It's really easy. Normally my method is to do an underpainting. Haha, there we go. Normally I do an underpainting first, tonal study, and then paint straight over over the top of that, do some background, back to the figure, back to the background, and kind of bring that all together in the final layers. But we're skipping a step in this case, and we are going to be starting with the picture in the back of the canvas. Now, normally, as I said, I would draw this from scratch and then do an underpainting, so like a tonal study and just one or two colors just to get the darks and the lights in the right place. Instead, we're starting with that already done, which makes it so much easier, particularly for beginners, and so much quicker as well. And I have just popped that on the canvas. There are other methods you could do. You could use a projector if you've got one of those little art projectors. They are really handy, and I have done that before. You could also just do like a sketch or something as well, and then paint from the beginning. But that is a bit more challenging, and it would probably take a little bit more time. So I managed this piece in probably about 4 hours of painting, which is still quite a long time, but not anywhere near as long as it would have taken me. Now, the first step I have done here is I have glued the picture to the canvas, and I used, as you can't see in the background there, it's the Atelier heavy gel. The reason I chose to use that instead of a normal glue is because I know that the art gel is meant for mixing with paints. I knew it wasn't going to interfere, chemical react with the paints that got put on top of it, and cause any problems. We printed onto acid-free paper as well, just to try and make sure that there wasn't going to be too much, I guess, interactions with that. In future, if I was going to do this, I would do the gesso after the fact, because putting the paper on top of the canvas that had been gesso, we ended up with a few ridges, which is what I wanted in the end, but it made it a little bit more difficult to stick it to. I don't normally do that. Sometimes I might do a paper transfer, or I'll do a sketch or something, but I don't normally stick the photo to the painting. That's not something I normally do, but it's actually worked out really well. The only issue with it is there is a small, you can see in here just occasionally, the outlines of the ridge where the paper is. And I think if I had done the gesso over the top of that, we would have ended up with a slightly better, I guess, finished, out to that. But that's okay. We spent a little bit of time, as you can see here, trying to put in some, paint and things to cover that up a little bit. And also, if you rip the page instead of cutting it, you end up with a slightly more, I guess, diffuse edge. The gradient going down to the sides is a little bit better. It doesn't catch the light quite so much as the problem if it's a little bit more rippled and it's been ripped rather than cut with a pair of scissors. So I would recommend doing that next time. You can just sometimes see it depending on where the light catches. You can see just down here now, back to front, where that is. But at no point can you actually see the actual painting. This is all fully painted over the top. There is no paper showing. This is all paint. And we'll get to that. So the first thing I'm doing in this one here is I am just grabbing some paint, some gloss gel. Maybe you could have used matte as well. It's not really an issue. And I am just getting in lots of thick paint into the background because I wanted this to have a lot of texture, and would help offset that little bit of that line around the edge of the paper. So the very first thing I did was to do that before I went back in and started putting in lots of layers on the face. I did consider maybe putting like a window in there as well to maybe like make this face be sort of looking out of a window, but in the end I was just like, let's just have a go and we'll just do it this way instead. So that's what I did. And I wanted, you can see at the end there, we put lots of colors and things through, you know, the background as well. Quite different from a lot of the other pieces that I would normally do, but that's okay. I'm just using my palette knife there just to get a little bit of a texture, as you can see, those sort of texture marks coming through, and get those edges done. And with all the texture that's been put on with the just on the background as well, it just adds a little bit of extra to it. I think I will speed this up very shortly. Just one other thing, I guess, you know, with doing this is just to do with the copyright and things of the pictures. Now this is a copyright-free image that I got from one of the copyright-free photo sites. I'll put the link down below as well. Just make sure, obviously, if you are going to be using other people's pictures as a you know, a reference in the painting, that, you know, you're not stealing someone else's, you know, photo. It's very important. So this is it's a CCO image, so it's free to use however I like, to do whatever with it as I like. Particularly as I'm using it fairly much as is. I am painting completely over the top of it, and I do add some extra you know, like hair and face lines, and I do change it up just a little bit, but it is fairly recognizable as, I guess, the original picture in the background. Whereas if you're just using a picture next to you and you're kind of, you know, painting elements from it, it's not, as long as it's not a direct copy, obviously, you know, it's not so much of a problem. But obviously make sure you're not using someone else's artwork to do this, for which they have 100% copyright for. So I've done my best efforts to make sure that this is all right to use. And then I'm just using a large brush, popping in a little bit of texture and just starting to get a little bit of some lights into the background there. Playing around with it. It did take me quite a long time to do this. It was the first time I've done one where I haven't painted the image as well as doing the background. You know, first. It's good because with acrylic paints in particular, they're quite transparent. So getting the layers and getting the, you know, the I've got no words today, I swear, this is terrible. Getting all the layers of paint, you know, sort of shining through, you know, like darks and lights and midtones, and getting it looking, you know, really three-dimensional really helps if you've got lots of layers of the paint, and obviously making sure you've got your darks and lights right. So having a painting underneath, you get those darks and, I guess, lights coming through your colors that you put a little bit over the top. It's why I do a tonal painting underneath to start off with. So this is really just the cheats tonal painting kind of underneath, but it really does help. And whatever paint you put on over the top, where those darks are underneath, makes the whole painting a bit darker. So it does help with that 3D you know, image. And I'm just starting in there, just starting to put in little bits of layers as I'm going through. I didn't start and just do the nose. You know, I just didn't start by putting in, you know, like just the nose or just the face or anything like that. I kind of was going, oh, let's put some darks in here and then put some lights in there. And I started off doing the darks and lights and ignoring the colors on the face mostly, which we'll go back and do in a later little part. And I started off sort of blocking in the main shapes. So doing a little bit of the folds on the fabric, putting in the darks, putting in some of the dark shadow under the, you know, the lips of the those pieces of fabric, and then very soon you'll see I start putting some little highlighty bits around the top of the cloak. Normally, when I would paint this, I would leave the highlights till very last to make sure I've got the highlights exactly where I need them. but because I was copying, you know, the painting underneath, my usual method of painting, starting with you know, darks and midtones, and then putting in the, you know, the very dark shadows and the very bright highlights kind of at the end to sort of balance it all out, didn't quite work. And probably the same with you. You'd want to make sure you get those highlights in as you're going, just to make sure you can still see them through what you're painting. You don't want to lose them under layers of paint before you paint them in, particularly if you're not very confident with putting in those darks and lights. And of course, it's the darks and lights in a painting, not necessarily the color, that gives it its, you know, the roundness and makes it look three-dimensional. You can make something look three-dimensional in like totally crazy colors, and the colors not be quite right, but it still looks three-dimensional. Whereas if you're just painting an apple in all just same sort of mid-tones, it's not going to look round. You can paint an apple in like purple and green and make it look round. Anyway, so here we are, just popping in some more of those I guess the flats and things in the back of that cloak. And I did change it up a little bit because the painting was quite dark in that area originally. As you can see, there's actually not much definition on on your left hand side of the cloak, over on that past where that nose highlight is. You can't really see too much in there, and I wanted to brighten that up a little bit, get a little bit more color in there, and I think that would be like, it was a Payne's grey or something like that, which has obviously got a little bit of blue in it, just to pull that through. And just going through and popping in some of those, you know, shadows and things on the face, and just trying to get that I guess turn of form back where it should be. And sometimes you need to over exaggerate those a little bit underneath and then go back in with your mid-tones, like just to get them all in the right place, because I did want to make sure that the entire picture was covered. I didn't want to have parts of the picture showing through at the final piece. It's been a little while since I've done any painting of faces, and it was taking me a little bit of time to get back into where all that needed to go. And obviously it's quite a different sort of face, I guess. We're dealing with black and white and color, not flesh tones. Yay. And also no eyes, which is great. I don't know why, like, it's just one of the parts of paintings that is actually, I've always found more difficult, is painting eyes. So not sure. Just getting in some of the eyelids there, just putting some highlights in the middle and some dark tones to the sides. It's quite good because it's quite a dramatic piece like this, and I would really recommend, if you were going to do this, you went with something like that is very dramatic, where the color isn't so important, where you can focus on, you know, the darks and lights. Like in this piece, this is actually a really good image, like to paint. And there's my other little daughter who's just snuck in the side frame there. She's like, "Mummy, what are you doing?" You can just like imagine what she's saying. "Oh, that's looking really good, Mummy." She really liked this, and she really liked it with the dark as well. She didn't like it once I'd put all the colour in it. Oh, anyway, I'm just putting a little bit of, was it Australian sienna? I think that was Australian sienna in there. Underneath the gold, because I wanted, as I said before, I wanted to make sure it was all fully painted. So I did actually put in I put grey under the silver, or white actually, I think, under the silver, and I did actually put like a bright sienna colour, bright sienna and yellow colour underneath the gold, just to make it, you know, pop through that little bit more. I didn't want to risk getting any of their paper showing through underneath. And yeah, I was really just kind of bitsing through this. I didn't focus on anything in particular. I kind of like a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and just kind of all pulled it all up together. Then went back and was just adjusting and fixing and pulling everything through. Anyway, what I was saying, my daughter really liked it with just the black background. And when she woke up in the morning and I'd put all the colours in the background, she was like, "What did you do that for, Mummy? I don't like it anymore." And I'm like, "Oh well, yes." I mean, I like the dark as well, and I think it looked really dramatic, but it wasn't what I was aiming to create. So yeah. And that's just adding a little bit of extra highlight down on to define that chin. It eventually goes back again when I put some other colours over the top, but that's it there. You can still see a little bit of that outline of the paper showing through, which wasn't amazingly what I wanted. All right, so these are just some colours that I am now going to be popping through onto the background of this piece. So we've got cobalt blue, was that ultramarine? I'm not quite sure. Phthalo green, red, some orange. I think I cheated and I did not mix my orange. It's unusual for me not to do that because I like to be able to pick the pigments that go in my oranges as a general rule. But I wasn't doing any blending or anything with that, so it wasn't quite as important, I guess. Yeah. Now my computer's beeping, telling me I'm having issues with the camera quality. So I'm really hoping that the image of me talking and the actual sound of it isn't quite as distorted as it seems to be on my screen at the moment. But anyway, so we're just going in and we're popping in some of the details on the face now. Throughout the last couple of stages, I've just been slowly putting in little bits of darks and lights and things under there, and now we're just going back in with some of those colors. So the phthalo green I thought was a fairly good match for this, and some of the blues, and just slowly popping in some of those. I'm not quite sure why I've got that being done at 1.5 speed and not 4. I did speed most of this up to like 4 times the speed because this was, as I said, it was like a 4-hour video, so I really didn't want you to have to sit through all of that. And I was just sort of like dotting things through, trying to keep it as accurate to the bottom, like the picture as I could, but at the same time I did want to change a few of the colors in some of the areas around a little bit, just to create a little bit more color than there was in there. And maybe next time I would probably do a little bit more as well, but yeah. And as I'm going through, I'm just like, oh, that could fix that a little bit, as it's drying, like, because the acrylic paints, it needed a little bit of drying time in between some things. So just to save, time, and I didn't want to go and get a hairdryer, so I just fiddle a little bit with the nose and then go back to over here while that nose is a little bit dried, and then I'll go back and, fiddle with it a little bit more, and things like that, just to make it a little bit easier. Now my palette up the top there is also, it's a wet palette as well. So much discussion about that on internet and art circles. Should you have a wet palette? Should you not have a wet palette? But because I paint a lot with like the kids around, or where I might be distracted by jobs, the washing, cooking, whatever it might happen to be, I can't really just pour out my acrylic paints in summer in Queensland, Australia, and expect them to still be usable in 20 minutes time. It just doesn't happen, particularly if I'm using little bits of paint. If I'm doing huge, great big abstract pieces, yeah, that's fine. But for this sort of stuff, when I've only got little tiny bits of paint coming out, I can't do that. So I use a wet palette. And you can look that up on line how to make it, but basically it's just it's actually an old pencil tin, as it happens, with just a normally I use like a piece of sponge cloth, but at the moment that's just paper towels, and then a piece of kitchen paper over the top, and then you put your paints on top of your kitchen paper, and the water doesn't come through, but it sort of humidifies the paint a little bit. A little bit of the moisture kind of sinks through a little bit, and it just means that your paints can stay wet for a very long time. Sometimes it sort of thins out the paint a little bit too much, which isn't always what you want, but certainly if it is, that's a great thing, but it does mean that your paint stays wet for a lot longer, which is very handy. In fact, sometimes my paints will last for a few days in here, as long as I remember to put water in the bottom of the paper towel or sponge, whatever's underneath it to hold that water. Can stay in there for a few days. In fact, one of them I found like a month later, and I don't know how it hadn't gone yucky or moldy or anything like that, but it hadn't. It was perfectly fine. I didn't use the paints, but they were still damp. So I'm not sure how that happened. Yeah, and it's a really handy tip, and I find it very very useful. Here I am though, just cheating and using it straight out of the jar. So that's just a Atelier gold paint, which is really quite pretty. I would much prefer the 24 karat gold paint that you can get from Decawart, but it's really hard to get in Australia at the moment. Everywhere is out, everywhere is on order, mail order, no one has it, and I'm really struggling to get it because I like to use it for my pour paintings. You can see, hang on, left, right, which way is it? Up there, that one, that painting there, which does actually have it in. It's out of focus on this video, but yeah, it's in there. And it's really super shiny. This I find I do need a couple of layers, and I do put a couple of layers in this as well. And just going back in, putting in a couple of little bits of bit of a hint, dark into the areas where I'm going to be putting the silver, and then that just, the contrast between the dark underneath and then the silver on top kind of pops out that silver a little bit more. One of their little art ticks, if you want a area to appear really bright, you put darks next to it somewhere in it, and even if it's not the brightest of brights, it'll appear brighter. So yeah, and then you can get colors that are, if you saw them, on a white piece of paper, like that is not light at all, but if it's next to something that's dark, it looks darker. So there we go. And that's just starting to put in some of those colors. You can see the silver, and I've just started to put little shadows under little parts of that silver where, you can imagine there'd be a big blob of the silver, and then if you put just a little shadow underneath it, it kind of pops it out just that little bit more, makes it a little bit more a bit more 3D. Okay, hopefully we're nearly up to the part where I speed it up to 4 times the speed, which is kind of what we want. And here we go. Here we go, a bit faster. And then just, faffing about, fiddling around with the face, just trying to get some of those extra colours in there. Not sure what I was putting on the canvas there, but that's fine. All right, so again, like I said, I was still not very happy with the line that piece of paper was showing on the canvas, and so I've just used some paint mixed with the gloss gel. You can see in the background there, it's the Atelier gloss gel. I think I do prefer to use the matte gel for this, and certainly if I wasn't going to be varnishing it, which I will do, I would be wanting to use the matte, but I was happy just to use the gloss just for this. It's just what I had. Just to try and create a slightly sort of a thicker, a border around that. And it does disappear a little bit more when I put the colors over the top of it, but so that white, it's just is some of the gel mixed in with some of the paint, just sort of to create a little bit of extra texture. And yeah, I really wanted this piece to have quite a lot of like texture in the background. Let me just see if I can try and get it somewhere you can see. Like there is actually quite a bit of sorry, my camera's back to front, so every time I turn left, I'm really mean to turn right. So it's like, there is actually quite a little bit of texture in the piece in there. And as I said, my daughter really liked it at this stage here. She thought that this background looked really great. And, maybe in future I will do another one that is a bit similar and is dark in the background and then a really super bright face. But it's not what I wanted. She was really upset, actually. I think she cried. Oh, she's only 6, but, she cried. She didn't like it. She's like, oh, it's still very good effort, Mummy. And I'm like, okay, thanks for using my lovely little parenting techniques on me. It's really nice, Mummy. It really is. So she's bawling her eyes out. Okay, fine. And as you can see, just with that little bit of extra gel and paint in there, those lines are starting to disappear a little bit. As I said, next time, rip the paper. If you're going to do it, rip the paper so you end up with not quite such a hard edge. Just when you rip it, you end up with those little hairs of the paper. It just will make that gradient not down like that. It'll just take it down to the canvas a little bit better. Or don't put the piece of paper down and use a projector or do a paper transfer. So that's where you reverse your image, pop it down on top of the canvas with some gel medium on it, and then wait for that to dry. Really press it down and then peel it off with some like a damp sponge and water on the back, and you can kind of just rub off the paper. I do that on a few things actually. It's quite handy. If you're looking for a really quick way to transfer a line image onto a canvas, that's the way to do it. If you've never done it before, I highly recommend it. Particularly if you're trying to do something, quickly, in a hurry, wanting to get a great effect for, a limited amount of time, and you just don't have time to do what you want to do. That's a really great way of doing it. You need to wait for it to dry, but I can do this in the evening when I'm, I've got the kids home, because it doesn't take very long, and then I can paint during the day if they're at daycare or school or whatever it is. Although recently sending the children to school has been somewhat of a challenge. Thank you, universe. It's been a bit tricky. My little one has a chronic sinus condition, which means she has a runny nose a lot. Yay. Anyway, so here we are, just starting to put in some silver layers into the background as well, which I liked. And I think this is a method that I will be doing a few videos on for you guys, just to have a little bit of a look at different ways you can use this technique to create some artwork. And okay, here we are. This is another day, obviously. I've changed camera positions, didn't quite get that right. And just going into the background there, so I'm reusing some of the colours that I used in the face, just to try and keep a little bit of consistency in the consistency in the painting. So I'm using a phthalo green, a cobalt blue, cobalt turquoise, and as said, a bit of a cheats mix of the orange and things there, and some yellows. Basically, I was just playing around with some of the colours. I've been working on a new palette colours at the moment, trying to figure out exactly what I like. Struggling with yellows, actually. I like nice yellow. And trying to find a replacement for the cadmiums. In fact, even the cadmiums aren't even what I want either. So just trying to find a really nice yellow. It mixes beautifully to make nice greens. And I know I've talked about it in another video I've done, the Globe. It's a cheap paint. It's like $2 a tube, versus a lot of these paints here, which are anywhere between $10 and $30 a tube. And it's really nice. It's a really nice warm yellow, and I just can't find anything that appropriates it very well at all. I've been meaning to try Azo Yellow Warm, actually. It's almost orange. It's a weird colour. It's a really bright, what's it called? doesn't matter, yellow ochre kind of color. It's really bright. Anyways, here I'm just starting to use a palette knife and just streaking some colors over the top. The idea here was to be able to see the black through. So as you can see, I'm not putting it on really super thick to start off with. I'm kind of scraping it over the canvas with the knife there just to get some color in, and then just going back in with the brush and putting a couple of those colors into the layers on the face and into the you know, the fold of the cloak over on your left hand side there, just to sort of differentiate it so it's not quite facing a border. Again, that wouldn't be quite such an issue had I done it the way I would normally have done this, and that would be to paint the face from scratch. But we're trying out new techniques, and also trying to find some, you know, easy things for you know, you guys to try, I guess. Because this is not particularly difficult. It's just, you know, like now pulling in the background is just scraping in these beautiful colors and just trying to get a nice blend. You don't want, I didn't want it to be completely, you know, little bits of green everywhere and little bits of red everywhere and little bits of blue everywhere. I have kind of tried to put so a little bit of red over one side, as you can see on the final print here. Like, see, there is more sort of red on this side than there is over on the other. There's more golds on this side. It's a little bit dark on the side and a little bit brighter on the side as well. Just sort of imagining that, you know, the light is more on your bottom left hand corner than it is. I could have played with that a little bit more and done that a little bit more dramatic, but I didn't. And here we are, just popping in the final layers of the gold over the top. And again, I waited for those colors to dry. That's an important point. Those colors to dry before I did that. And also just popping in, the paper had a couple of little bubbles in it from when I put it over the top of the gesso, which is again why I suggested at the beginning maybe to put the gesso on after, because you end up with some little, you know, little bubbles under the face. And I've overpainted them with some white, kind of to put like cracks down the front of his face. It could be hair or highlights of hair or something along those lines. And I quite like that. And unfortunately, I've missed the very final part of this video at the last few seconds here, because I've just started to put a little bit of touch-ups on that eye. And you can just see I've just missed that tiny little bit where I've put that little bit of extra highlights on there. And that is the rest of the cracks gone over the top of the face, and that's what the final picture there looks like. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing a interesting sort of mixed media acrylic piece that you guys can do. It's a really fantastic technique. I love it. The only things, as I said, make sure that border is a little bit less defined. The other way to do it, of course, is to use a canvas that's the same size as your original piece of paper, so there is no border. The border, it goes on the edge of the canvas. That is another way to do that. And hopefully we'll be doing a few more of these over the next few weeks. I've got another couple already that I have started, so I will get them done. I'm sorry this has been a little bit of I guess a longer video. I'm assuming some of you probably fast forwarded through it a little bit, hopefully not, but that's okay. And please leave comments, you know, share a picture if you do something that is similar, or if you've got any questions or anything like that, please let me know. And as always, you know, if you could hit like, that would be amazing. And we will see you next time. Thanks, guys.